My Rabbi say, when the unthinkable happens, when the unspeakable occurs, and then people reflect, they quickly realize that the unthinkable and the unspeakable are also the unfathomable. We can't comprehend. We can't understand. In the extraordinary words of the Kotzka, wollte ich ihm verstanden, wollte ich ihm nicht gewollt dienen. If I really understood him, I wouldn't want to serve him. He wouldn't be that beyond me that would make me want to worship him. I think the Thenakuda is best illustrated by the Vilna Gaon himself in what we say in the most intense moments of the year, on Yom Kippur, Eila Eskera, when we remember and try to internalize the murder of the Asara Ruge Malchus. Chazal tell us that when they took Hoitziu Tchila, this is the lashon of the Paitan, Hoitziu Tchila, who did they take out first? Shnayim mehem Hoitziu Tchila, Shehem Gedolei Yisrael was Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol of Rab Shimon. Chazal say that the torture and the defacing of Rabbi Shmuel was horrid. Ukeshegia lemekoim tfilin tzara b'koil ma liyoytze nishmasai. He called out, he screamed a horrible shriek. Safei mala tzaku b'mara. In heaven, the malachim, they began to shout bitterly, Zoi Torah v'zoi schara. This is Torah and this is the reward for Torah. And so on. Ansa Baskal Mishamayim. So Baskal answered, Im Eshma Koil Acha, if I'm going to hear one more, Koil Acha, one more sound, Ehefoiches Ha'olam Lamayim, L'toyu v'voyu Oshis Hadoimayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says through the Baskal, if one more shriek, and I'll turn the world into its primordial state of absolute astonishing nothingness. Toyu v'vayu. Asks the Vilna Gaon, why is that the response? This is the response to Zoi Torah v'Zoi Schara. The Malachim are asking a very powerful question. Is the answer, I will turn the world back into nothingness, into a void? Says the Vilna Gaon, he brings an extraordinary mashal, that once upon a time there was a king who was very vain, and he had a contest of who could create him a better wardrobe, and there was one particular tailor who was a master tailor who said to the king, I will fashion for you a garment like has never been before. But I need material, expensive material. And the king said, Ki ad hamelech, I'll give you whatever you require. And he gave him measurements of what he needed. He measured the king, and he told him how many yards of gold fabric he needs. The king, of course, supplied it. The tailor went to work. He made a beged that was absolutely exquisite. The king pranced around in this beged like a peacock. He was so proud, he was so happy. And someone planted in his mind that perhaps something nefarious happened here. Did he need so much gold fabric? It was an enormous amount. The king's only 6 feet tall. Why did you need so much? And he kept eating away at the king's trust till the king finally called in the tailor and said to this unfortunate, hapless tailor, I'm concerned that you didn't use all the fabric for me. Perhaps there was some embezzlement. I want you to account for every meter, for every centimeter. The tailor started to explain how he makes a garment. He says, I have lapels, I have linings, I have pockets, I have folds, I have a hem. He said, still, you don't need so much. He said, you know what? I'll prove it to the king. And the king was happy. You can prove it to me? He says, I can. And he asked his apprentice for his long tailor shears. And he took those long scissors and he said to the king, would you kindly take off the garment for a moment? Which the king did, laid it out on the table, took the long scissors, and he was about to cut. And the king said, what are you doing? You're going to ruin the suit. What are you doing? To which the tailor said, there's no other way. I have to open every stitch, every seam, undo every pocket, until I could fold it pashut, the way it was originally, a sheet of fabric, and show you what I did and tucked in everything. And then you'll understand how I made this garment. But for you to understand, I have to undo it, dismantle it. The king said, enough. I want to keep my garment. Says the Gra. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you want to understand my inscrutable ways? You want to understand all the folds and tucks and pockets throughout the ages, the ins and the outs? You ask me one more time, one more shriek, and I'll explain it to you. But for me to explain it to you, I'll have to dismantle the Bria. I'll have to return it to Sayhu Vavayu. Rabbi say, it's indeed inscrutable. It's unfathomable. How could we understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways? I once met an elderly woman, a woman who survived the war, born in Hungary, and she was one of the lucky ones who made it through. She told me that she was, I don't remember if it was her family, immediate or extended family, suffered a horrific tragedy. And the Satmar Rebbe, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, the Divrei Yoel, came to be Menachem Avel. And sitting there, he turned to the family and said the following. Vader was gläubt nicht in ich doch hat Teretz. Und Vader was gläubt ja is nicht doch a kasha. For he who doesn't believe, there will be no answer. And for he who does, there never will be the question. That's how we are. That's a munah. That's a munah that has been baked into us. Wollte ich ihm verstanden, wollte ich ihm nicht gewollt dienen. If I could comprehend him, I wouldn't want to worship him. It's that he is beyond, is that he's unreachable, that he's unfathomable, that he has the tucks and the folds, what makes him. And Ili Yadaitiv Hayisiv, as the Rishonim say. Rabbi say, a Thai Yedid of mine, Rabbi Levitan, so sein gesund, Rav in Pomona, shared with me what he saw in the Hakdama to the Sridei Eish. Rabbi Yanker Yechiel Weinberg, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, Adam Gadol, the Sridei Eish, once had a conversation with one of the great minds and scientists of all time, Albert Einstein. And he discussed with him the extent of his belief. What do you believe? And Einstein answered him. He says, Any intelligent scientist understands that there are things that are beyond his grasp. It's lamala. If it satisfies you, let's consider that area, that tchum, that's beyond us. Let's call it, let's acknowledge, let's call it God. And Rabbi Yankiv Yechiel Weinberg, his reaction was, this is Nebuch. For your level of God is only beyond what you understand or what you claim you understand. And that changes every single day. What today you didn't understand and you call it Elokus, godliness, deity, tomorrow you will understand perhaps. And God evaporates. God can't be fluid. We believe the same in what we do understand and what we don't understand. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ever omnipresent, ever with us. In Shnayim Oichsen Betalis, the Eibishter stands over our Mishnah, the same way that he stands over the Asara Heruge Malchus that's beyond us. It's a living emunah for us. And as Rav Moshe Chagiz says, after we say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Midas Adin, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, All Saints, Midas Adin, Midas Arachim, it's all one for us. A Yid covers his eyes by Krishma. A Yid covers his eyes by Krishma because he, after all, has blind faith. Blind faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a tata, he's a father, and ultimately, Kol Mada Ovid Rachman Latav, he's doing the best for us. My inability to comprehend is my limitation, not any other limitation, Kaviyachal. But there's another aspect to what we call the inscrutable and the unfathomable, that which is beyond us. My father, Zechayin Levracha, as a matter of fact, I remind myself now, he used to quote the Gra, that the taich of the word Shamayim, as we all know from Chazal, is a contraction of two words, Eish and Mayim, but the Gra says that Shamayim is just like Yad, and Yad becomes Yodayim, then Sham and Sham become Shamayim. Sham, there, and beyond there, beyond my reach, Sham, Sham, double Sham, Shamayim, beyond. There's an incredible Rosh ala Torah. The Rosh ala Torah, on the Pasuk, the very, in Yiddish you say schrecklich, an awful, Pasuk filled with awe and fright. In Devarim Lamed Aleph, V'chora api boi bayoim hahu, v'azavtim v'histarti ponai mehem, v'hoya le'achoy l'mitzouhu ro'is rabis v'tzoros, v'oma bayoim hahu, haloi al ki'en elaka b'kirbi, mitzooni harois ha'ela. There will be times where a person will feel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't feel him. I don't feel he's there for me. I don't feel he's there for this situation. Because how could it happen if he was there? Chalila b'chas. The Pasuk predicts, V'chora api b'yoyim hahu. And the V'histarti Panai says the Rosh, he brings, it's a rarity, he brings a Ramban. And he says, V'histarti Panai mehem, zehu derech chiba. This is an act of love. Ka'adam shechata loy b'nai. Like someone whose son sinned against the father. V'amar l'rabbi l'halkoisai. And he instructs the Rebbe or the master to punish the child, to strike him. Because he can't watch it himself. So there will be a moment, v'histarti panai, that there will be a hastoras panim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only there's a hastoras panim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not shining his midas harachmim on us, but there will be a chiba, I can't watch it. I can't see it. What pains us as Yidden, what pains many of us as parents, and particularly the families, what's there to say? But there's a second circle of families. The families of the hurting, internally bleeding chaverim of the niftarim. And because of matzavim, we're divided by a great sea, by a great ocean. And when parents would normally want to grab their children and hug them and soothe them and comfort them and give them the chama and security for what they witnessed, what they lived through, what they lost. They can't do that now. And they have to resign themselves to doing it over the phone or other methods, reaching across the ocean. But they're tatas who can't, they just can't handle the pain of their children. Sarah the Yanuka. Sarah the Yanuka by a bris doesn't let a father make a shechianu. Sarah the Yanuka. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a hastaras panim because these are his children and he also can't see it. How could it happen then? Why did it happen? Who can say it? Who could dare give an answer to why? Even almost what? A tata. I knew a Yid. We were zeicha that he used to, when he came to New York, he used to daven in our shul. But he lived in Toronto. He was a sweet Holocaust survivor. He was sweet. His name was Rabbi Sanik. And the man went through a lot. He was in his 90s when he told me this story. I remember at Shalashudas in our shul. Rabbi could speak about the Holocaust and not break down until he mentioned his father. And when he mentioned his father's name, the tears would flow. He and his father, under the Nazis, in the camps, were now assigned to working in what would be called a glass factory. His labeled sister was confined somewhere else on the other end of the camp. And he was noiser chen through his charm and his abilities to have one of the Nazi guards act as a courier to bring back and forth various things and various messages to his sister. And that sustained them. But they knew that the day he's caught, Rahman al-Itzlan for everyone involved. And the day came. And when this guard was caught, the Nazi investigation didn't stop with him. And one day they crash into the factory and they shouted, "Sonic? Sonic?" Label told, Reb Label, his father didn't look much older than he. His father was very youthful, very young looking, probably got married young. Reb Label was 17, 18. His father was 35, 36. And he went over to his son, grabbed him, pushed him closer to the ovens and the work, and said, just stand here. And he called out, I'm coming. They meant his son. But he took his place. And he could get away with it because of his youthful look. And then he opened up his lapel, in which he had sewn in a diamond in case he survives the war and needs some funds. Opened it up, ripped open that seam, and pressed it into his son's hand. And told him to bleib da, you stay here. And walked out proudly because he had just done the greatest deed of his life. He saved his son. When Rabbi would mention his father, he would melt it down. Atata. And when Rabbi Levitan asked Rabbi, how did you remain an Elachid after the war? And Rabbi told him the story as well. And then he would say, Wie hab ich gekannt nicht sein a Elachid? How could I not be what my father was? But I hear something else in this. He understood the taich of a tata. If a father is willing to sacrifice himself so for his child and give him his all, just walk away from life so that my son has everything possible. We have two tatas. We have a tata here and we have a tata upstairs. Is the tata upstairs, does he love me less? I just don't understand. Someone who observed the scene would have also not understand what the elder Sonic did with the younger Sonic, standing from a distance, pushing him closer to the glass oven. But if you have the whole picture, if the garment is undone, you see it all. For he who believes, there are no questions. We as tatas, we fret for our children. Like I said, what they saw, what they experienced. He did of mine's child. Hashem Yirachem, lahavdil ben chayim l'chayim, literally crawled out of a gate salmavis. I don't want to express more detail. And fathers are aching for their children. We have to try to be mechazik our children because the kashas erode and chizuk gives us backbone. Wie kann ich nicht sein a Elachid if my father is? And we're able to infuse that to our children, our emunah, our betachin, and understanding that we don't understand. Bachrim in the yeshivas that are so affected, I think they have a sense of what the Gemara says, that ha'imid al meis b'shas yitzias nishmasai, b'shas yitzias nishama, is koireya, is chayif l'kroya ke'al sefer Torah she'nisraf. I'm not saying the Lashon perfectly. He has to rise kriya as if he saw a sefer Torah, in flames. The Ramban explains that every single person is like a sefer Torah because his neshama is like the shemos, the askaros on the gvil. Our guf is the gvil, the scroll, the parchment. Our neshama are those oisis of the Torah. And when they separate, that's the Yitzias Neshama. That's the Ramban. Torah's Adam. I think many of our children feel that they experienced that. They were Oimid al Meis. They saw Oisius Parchas, Rachman al Itzlan. I think that they're looking to us for chizuk, to be toifeach al manasla hatfiach, that we have enough, as the Vilna Gaon, as the Dubna Maggid brings from the Vilna Gaon, Hashpa does not mean when you pour from Kli Aleph into Kli Beis, but when Kli Aleph is so full that it overflows. We, for our children, have to be the Kli Aleph. We have to overflow with the emunah and betachin that spills over to our children, so that they can go forward, they can go on. Let me conclude with a remarkable Pri Chadash. The Pri Chadash in Tov Tzadi Gimel asks an obvious question. Lag Boima is a simcha. The Ramah brings Mabim Simcha K'tzas Simcha. What's the simcha? So Mefarshim say that the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva ceased to expire. The dying stopped. He asks the Pri Chadash, of course the dying stopped. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 Talmidim. He lost all 24,000 Talmidim. Of course the dying stopped. There was no one left to die. Das ist a simcha. That's pure churban. Absolute churban. Says the Pri Chadash. And it's already brought in Kisvei Ari. Says the Pri Chadash. That's the day that Rabbi Akiva gave smicha to his new Talmidim, the different gears, 5 or 7. Gave smicha to his Talmidim and began anew. That after a churban of losing a cheshbon of maybe 800 Talmidim a day, 24,000 Talmidim in 33 days, Rabbi Akiva picked himself up and began all over again. Found his new Talmidim, was masmich them, and these are the Talmidim that the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Stam Mishnah Rab Meir, Stam Tosefta Rab Nechemia, and as weiter, Mechilta, Sifra, Sifri, V'chulu ar Lipa de Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva began anew, and that's the Torah Shebapeh HaMetzuya B'Yadeinu. Not to allow tragedy to paralyze, so that the only time tragedy is victorious is when we are defeated. Rabbi Akiva could not be defeated despite all. Rabbi say that's the yisoid, the simcha of Lag Boima. On our very, very bitter Lag Boima. There will be a crack in the darkness, and that crack will be that we'll go on. We'll go on. The mishpachas, the heilige mishpachas of the neshamas kedoshos, that's the lashon of the Pnei Yeshua in his Hakdama, when he describes his disaster, the disaster that spurred him to go on when he lost his wife, his mother-in-law, her father, and his baby daughter. And he promised HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I come out of this Gehenna, I'll write the Sefer. And that's our Pnei Yeshua. The koyach, despite all to go on, that's the koyach of Lag Boima. That's the koyach of Yiddishkeit. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give the heilige, the mishpachas of the heilige neshamas, who is worthy to even address them. The next circle of chaverim, yedidim, whose hearts are broken, but have to learn the side of Lag Boima. We go on. Despite all, we go on. And the dear parents whose hearts are aching for their children's broken hearts, who will muster the koyach to be able to give their children the emunah, the betachin, and yes, the hope of Simchas Chaim that will come. Mirz Hashem soon. And we should all be zeicha to the great ultimate Simcha of Tchias HaMesim, in which It'll be V'haya b'yayim hahu, Hi Hashem echad u'shmai echad, that it'll kim, and Yud Kei Vav Kei is echad, and we will not need Soyu V'vayu to understand the unfathomable. La Yishama Oid Shoid V'Sheva B'Gvuleinu, and we should be Zeicha only to Psulas Taivas.